So, let's talk about this idea that I've always really had in my head, rolling around in my head, but I've never really taken it off further than it had. Yeah, so as you can see, Gravity Falls in Dracula. Now, this really makes a lot of sense, Dracula being in Gravity Falls, because again, first off, in public domain, so if Alex Hirsch really wanted to, if he really wanted to use Dracula in a story of Gravity Falls, then he could, Yeah, he could have done a story with him. I mean, yeah, it's also mentioned that, of course, Mabel said that she had met a bunch of cute vampires once during the episode The Deep End, so, just saying. Anyway, so yeah, it would make sense that Dracula just seems like something that would fit right into the Gravity Falls universe. So you're probably wondering, well, first off, Gravity Falls is all the way in, the northwestern part of America, and, Dracula's all the way in fucking Transylvania. How does one get from point A to point B? Well, here's the loose idea I had for Dracula and how he got to Gravity Falls. So the idea was that what happened after Van Helsing and the others saved Mina's soul and slew Dracula, some of his followers took his corpse, and put it back in a coffin of earthly soil. And knowing that Europe was no longer safe for him, they decided to, they took him overseas. However, it wasn't just Van Helsing, but also several other vampire hunters who, got wind that Dracula's followers were trying to take him to the States and give him shelter and, try to resurrect him. So for years, years and years, Dracula's coffin was moved from one place to another in an attempt to resurrect him. And yeah, they would just, they just had to keep hiding him. They just had to keep hiding him and wait for the right moment to resurrect him because, yeah, and you may be thinking, well, just give him some blood and I'd be fine. Problem is that after he he quintessentially got, the stake through the heart, he also got his throat cut and head cut off. So that's how you really kill a vampire. So, unfortunately, while they did have his body, they didn't have his head. So, unfortunately, for years, it was this cat-and-mouse game of trying to save the followers were trying to save Dracula's remains for a good amount of time, and while at the same time, the Van Helsing and the vampire hunters chased him all throughout Europe and then into the States. However, at this point, World War I was kind of, World War I was kind of on the verge of happening, and in fact, it did kind of happen in this kind of prologue of the story. And during that time, during the Great Wars, it was called, Van Helsing, who was an old man at this point, had kind of, he's getting too old for this shit. So yeah, this was the perfect opportunity for the followers finally get over the States and find somewhere to hide him. However, Van Helsing wasn't the only vampire hunter. There were many more who would go out and try to hunt down Dracula and his followers. However, they made the mistake of keeping the head of Dracula unguarded. So while the body was being hid in America, other followers managed to get the head and took off with it. So yeah, it was just a matter of time before they eventually found a place to finally hide out. That place was Gravity Falls. A secluded place in Oregon. It was the perfect place to hide, the Lord of the Undead. And they managed to attach the head back, and were just about to pull the stake out of his heart and bring him back to life once more. However, the followers showed up. The vampire hunters showed up, killed all the followers, and while they weren't able to destroy the body because when the fighting was going down between the followers and the hunters. Some of the followers took Dracula's corpse and hid it in another area and claimed that, oh, we moved it miles and miles away. Ha ha ha, you'll never find the body now. They'll believe that, right? So, yeah, that was kind of it, is that they lied and said they moved the body again, while in fact, they just hid the body and waited for hopefully something else to come along and, save their master from, eternal damnation, Or, well, he's already eternally damned, so I would say endless death. So, Yeah, so we fast forward to to several years later. We fast forward to several years later, and now we follow Robbie as well as Tambry, Lee, Thompson, and Nate, who are kind of just dicking around in a graveyard until they come across Dracula's body while screwing around in one of the mausoleums. And unfortunately, Robbie, being the idiot that he is, accidentally cuts his hand, and the blood drips into Dracula's mouth. So, yeah. Dracula is reborn through just a few drops of blood, still weak, but he turns Robbie into his new Renfield, and Tambry into like one of his new brides, and also Lee, Nate, and Thompson into the first of his new vampires. So that was kind of the whole idea there. That was the idea in a nutshell. Obviously, I gave a lot of more thought into how Dracula got into America in the first place. I know it sounds a lot like the story. It sounds similar to the story of the Batman from the Batman vs. Dracula animated film. I'm aware of that because actually that's where I kind of got the idea of, oh, Dracula's body was just moved to the States. Although there it was just like, we need to get this we don't want this body here in our town anymore. Whereas here it's more like followers. Where in the Batman Dracula film, it's more like, get his ass out of our town. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting idea of just being like, yeah, let's just move the body to the States. Anyway, so yeah, that was kind of that was as far as I got in terms of ideas. It's just Dracula starting a new vampire society in Gravity Falls, and the twins trying to stop him. That was kind of the whole idea in a nutshell, for the most part. What kind of Dracula? You're probably wondering what my incarnation of Dracula would be like. Nothing too drastic. It would probably be like, I guess you could say my interpretation of Dracula is something along the lines of like Marvel's Dracula, or the Batman vs. Dracula version that was voiced by Peter Stormare, where he's this very sophisticated and very very charming and very intelligent person, but at the same time, he can just turn on a dime and just turn into this snarling monster. So yeah, I've always kind of liked that kind of interpretation of Dracula, where he's like this charming monster, more or less. But yeah, like I said, that was as far as I really got, so you guys tell me, what do you guys think of this Gravity Falls Dracula idea? Do you guys like it? Do you guys hate it? Just comment below, let me know, and once again, hope you all enjoyed this, and I will see you guys later.